William Walker Atkinson's The New Psychology, Its Message, Principles, and Practice. Chapter 2 was the ego, or self. This is Chapter 3, Egoism, not Egotism. To some, it might appear that the suggestions concerning the recognition of the ego advanced in the preceding chapter are calculated to encourage the quality of egotism among those accepting the advice. As a matter of fact, the true recognition of the pure ego is diametrically opposed to the objectionable trait or quality known generally as egotism. In egotism, we find the person filled with an overweening sense of importance and qualities of his personality. He imagines that he is not as other men, and that he is immensely superior to them, and of far greater relative importance. The egotist is wrapped up in his personality and the things of the me. It is always me and mine with him, and unfortunately, there has been a great confusion in the meaning of the term egoism, by reason of the objectionable characteristics of egotism. The two terms have been regarded as identical, although they are as far apart as the poles. It is only when we pass by the common acceptation of the term egoism and consider it in its philosophical aspect that we may begin to understand its real meaning. In the first place, it is not connected with the attributes of personality. It concerns itself solely with individuality. The egoist does not compare his personality with that of others, for he regards personality as a something belonging to him and yet not himself. His sense of the ego consists in the recognition of the reality of the I, which is his real self, and consequently the things of personality fade into comparative insignificance. As an old writer has said, whether we try to avoid it or not, we must face this reality sometime, the reality of our own egohood, that which makes us say I, and in saying I leads to the discovery of a new world. As to the confusion regarding egoism and egotism, the same writer has said, our ego tells us of the duties we owe others because they are I's as we are. And another old writer informs us of the ideal individual, of whom he says, with that union of intellectual egoism and moral unselfishness, which is a characteristic of his large and liberal nature. So, you see that egoism is a far different thing from the quality known as egotism. Egoism, as the term is used in this book, is the doctrine of the reality of the ego, or I, and of its recognition and realization. It is the recognition, realization, and manifestation of the I, of the individual. It teaches that man is not merely the composite of his feelings, emotions, and ideas, but that he is a something back of and under these mental states and activities. Something that is, or should be, the master of these secondary things. It is not necessary to accept any particular theory or idea regarding the nature of the I in order to manifest its powers. Whether the I be the soul, or whether it be a center of conscious energy in a world soul, or whether it be simply a focus of the universal energy of material science, it matters not. The important thing about it in psychology is that it is, and may be recognized, realized, and manifested. And in this recognition, realization, and manifestation is to be found the keynote of the new psychology. It may be objected to that it can make no material difference to the individual whether he is able to distinguish between the I and the me or not. that he must live his life according to his nature in either case. But this contention is not correct, for the realization of the I at once causes the individual to know that he is not merely what he thinks, feels, and wills, but is rather a something that thinks, feels, and wills, and may govern and master these mental activities, instead of being governed and mastered by them. There is a vast difference in this point of view. There is the greatest difference from the pragmatic point of view, for according to the old idea, the man is a slave and a creature of his mental states, while under the new idea, he may assume his rightful place on the mental throne and make his choice as to what feelings he may wish to feel, what emotions he may wish to experience, what thoughts he may wish to think, and what things he may wish to do. In short, the egoist becomes the master instead of the slave. He realizes that the sovereign will of the individual resides in the ego, and that even his mental states must obey its mandates. The average man is a slave to his thoughts, ideas, and feelings. He is governed by inherited tendencies and the suggestions of other minds. He allows his feelings to run away with him and does not realize that he may regulate and govern them, changing and inhibiting them at will. He thinks that he is what he seems to be, and fails to understand that he may make himself that which he wishes to be. The average man, the average person, is a mere puppet of environment and outside influences. He is moving along like an automaton. He is simply his me, and it does not realize that he is an I. He is swept from his feet by waves of feeling that he is utterly unable, starting again. He is swept from his feet by waves of feeling that he is utterly unable to repress or control, and is a creature of his own feelings and moods. He does not realize what self-mastery is. The words convey no meaning to him, for he does not recognize the self. He is mastered by the me instead of mastering by the I. The men who have risen from the ranks and who stand head and shoulders above their fellows in mental achievement have invariably realized the I, although they may never have reasoned it out consciously. Their recognition may have been intuitive. But all men and women who have done things have found this I within and beyond the me. This mastery by the I opens up an entirely new world of thought, feeling, and activity to the individual. To be able to make of oneself what one will is truly a wonderful thing. To think what one wants to think, feel what one wants to feel, do what one wants to do. Surely, this is an achievement worthy of a master. And it is possible to those who will take the time and the trouble to acquire the art of self-mastery and self-expression. We shall not dwell upon this idea at length at this point, for the idea will permeate the entire work, and will be brought out in reference to every phase of mentation. But before passing on to the next chapter, we would like you to consider the following words of Edward Carpenter in reference to the state of the ordinary man who is ruled by his mind instead of ruling it. Carpenter says, We moderns are unaccustomed to the mastery over our own inner thoughts and feelings. That a man should be a prey to any thought that chances to take possession of his mind is commonly among us assumed as unavoidable. It may be a matter of regret that he should be kept awake all night from anxiety as to the issue of a lawsuit on the morrow, but that he should have the power of determining whether he be kept awake or not seems an extravagant demand. The image of an impending calamity is no doubt odious, but its very odiousness, we say, makes it haunt the mind all the more pertinaciously, and it is useless to try to expel it. Yet, this is an absurd position for man, the heir of all the ages, to be in, hag-ridden by the flimsy creatures of his own brain. If a pebble in our boot torments us, we expel it. We take off the boot and shake it out. And once the matter is fairly understood, it is just as easy to expel an intruding and obnoxious thought from the mind. About this there ought to be no mistake. No mistake, no two opinions. The thing is obvious, clear, and unmistakable. It should be as easy to expel an obnoxious thought from the mind as to shake a stone out of your shoe. And until a man can do that, it is just nonsense to talk about his ascendancy over nature and all the rest of it. He is a mere slave, and a prey to the bat-winged phantoms that flit through the corridors of his own brain. Yet the weary and careworn faces that we meet by thousands, even among the affluent classes of civilization, testify only too clearly how seldom this mastery is obtained, how rare, indeed, to meet a man. How common, rather, to discover a creature hounded on by tyrant thoughts or cares or desires, cowering, wincing under the lash, or perchance priding himself to run merrily in obedience to a driver that rattles the reins and persuades him that he is free, whom he cannot converse with in careless tete-a-tete, because that alien presence is always there on the watch. The same authority continues. It is one of the prominent doctrines that the power of expelling thoughts, or if need be, killing them dead on the spot, must be attained. Naturally, the art requires practice, but like other arts, when once acquired, there is no mystery or difficulty about it, and it is worth practice. It may indeed fairly be said that life only begins when this art has been acquired. For obviously, when, instead of being ruled by individual thoughts, the whole flock of them in their immense multitude and variety and capacity is ours to direct and dispatch and employ where we list, life becomes a thing so vast and grand, compared with what it was before, that its former condition may well appear almost antenatal. And if you can kill a thought dead for the time being, you can do anything else with it that you please. And therefore, it is that this power, it's so valuable. And it not only frees a man from mental torment, which is 9/10, at least, of the torment of life, but it gives him a concentrated power of handling mental work absolutely unknown to him before. The two things are correlative to each other. While at work, your thought is to be absolutely concentrated in it, undistracted by anything, whatever irrelevant to the matter in hand, pounding away like a great engine with giant power and perfect economy, no wear and tear of friction or dislocation of parts owing to the working of different forces at the same time. Then when the work is finished, if there is no more occasion for the use of the machine, it must stop equally, absolutely, stop entirely, no worrying, as if a parcel of boys were allowed to play their devilments with a locomotive as soon as it was in the shed, and the man must retire into that region of his consciousness where his true self dwells. I say that the power of the thought machine itself is enormously increased by this faculty of letting it alone on the one hand, and of using it singly and with concentration on the other. It becomes a true tool, which a master workman lays down when done with, but which only a bungler carries about with him all the time to show that he is the possessor of it. Then on and beyond the work turned out by the tool itself is the knowledge that comes to us apart from its use. When the noise of the workshop is over, and mallet and plane laid aside, the faint sounds coming through the open window from the valley and the far seashore, the dim fringe of diviner knowledge which begins to grow, poor thing, as soon as the eternal click-clack of thought is over. The extraordinary intuitions, perceptions, which, though partaking in some degree of the character of the thought, spring from entirely different conditions, and are the forerunners of a changed consciousness. The same writer then considers the subject of desires, as mastered by the ego, as follows. As already said, the subjection of thought is closely related to the subjection of desire, and has consequently its specially moral as well as its specially intellectual relation to the question in hand. 9/10 of the scattered or sporadic thought with which the mind usually occupies itself when not concentrated on any definite work is what may be called self-thought, thought of a kind which dwells on and exaggerates the sense of self. This is hardly realized in its full degree till the effort is made to suppress it. And one of the most excellent results of such an effort is that with the stilling of all the phantoms which hover around the lower self, one's relation to others, to one's friends, to the world at large, and one's perception of all that is concerned in these relations come out into a purity and distinctness unknown before. Obviously, when the mind is full of little desires and fears which concern the local self, and is clouded over by the thought images which such desires and fears evoke, it is impossible that it should see and understand the greater facts beyond and its own relation to them. But with the subsiding of the former, the great vision begins to dawn, and a man never feels less alone than when he has ceased to think whether he is alone or not. In this somewhat extended quotation from Mr. Carpenter, we'll be seeing clearly the idea of egoism as opposed to egotism. The mastering of the personality by the individuality, rather than the undue importance attaching to mere personality, which is the basis of egotism. Mr. Carpenter's remarks, while uttered in connection with an entirely different subject, nevertheless convey a vital message in connection with the new psychology, and accordingly, we have reprinted them in this work, feeling that he has stated the matter in a most forcible and clear manner, in words likely to be remembered by those who read them. Chapter 4 will be Consciousness and Beyond.